Let me tell you something that people rarely recognize in themselves. People-pleasing doesn't begin with kindness. It begins with fear. Fear of conflict, fear of rejection, fear of becoming too much or not enough, or suddenly unwanted. At some point in your life, you learned that harmony mattered more than honesty, that being agreeable was safer than being real, that your needs could wait, but other people's emotions couldn't. If you've ever felt uncomfortable saying no, even when yes cost you something, you already know this story. It's written into the way you soften your opinions before sharing them, the way you rehearse conversations in your head, the way you apologize even when you've done nothing wrong. You might not remember when it started, only that one day you were expressing yourself freely, and another day you were watching yourself carefully. People-pleasing doesn't feel like a choice when it begins. It feels like awareness, like maturity, like being emotionally intelligent. You notice what others need before they ask. You sense tension before anyone names it. You adjust, you accommodate, you adapt. And people notice. They call you considerate. They call you easy to be around. They say things like, "You're so understanding," or "You're just so kind." But what they don't see is the quiet calculation happening underneath, the constant scanning, the internal question that never really turns off. How do I need to be right now so everything stays okay? For many people pleasers, this pattern begins early, not because they were weak, but because they were perceptive. Children who grow into people pleasers are often emotionally observant. They notice moods, they sense instability, they feel when love becomes conditional. And when a child realizes that expressing certain emotions leads to withdrawal, disappointment or conflict, the brain adapts. It learns a simple rule: keep others comfortable and you'll stay safe. At first it's subtle. You stop asking for things. You become easy. You learn which parts of yourself are welcome and which ones cause friction. Over time, this doesn't just shape behavior, it shapes identity. You don't just act agreeable, you become the agreeable one. You become the mediator, the listener, the one who understands everyone's side, the one who doesn't want to be a burden. And somewhere along the way, you stop asking a dangerous question: what do I want? Because wanting feels risky. Wanting introduces the possibility of disappointment, yours or theirs, and disappointment feels like disconnection. So you learn to minimize yourself in ways that look generous from the outside. You say yes when you're tired. You stay quiet when something hurts. You convince yourself that it doesn't matter that much. But your body remembers. It remembers the tension in your chest when you agree to something you don't want to do. It remembers the resentment you swallow and call patience. It remembers how often you put yourself second and call it empathy. People-pleasing teaches you to confuse being liked with being safe. You start to believe that approval equals security, that as long as everyone around you is okay, nothing bad will happen. This is why conflict feels so threatening. Not because you're fragile, but because conflict once meant loss. Loss of connection, loss of warmth, loss of stability, so you avoid it, even when it costs you your truth. You might notice how deeply responsible you feel for other people's emotions. If someone is upset, you wonder what you did wrong. If someone is distant, you replay every interaction. If someone is unhappy, you instinctively try to fix it. This isn't kindness, it's hyper-responsibility. Your nervous system learned that emotional peace depended on you, that it was your job to smooth things over, to keep things calm, to keep people close. And over time, that responsibility becomes exhausting. You may find yourself feeling strangely invisible. People know you as supportive, reliable, understanding, but rarely deeply known, because the version of you they see is filtered, curated, safe. You show the parts of yourself that won't disrupt the connection. You hide the parts that might, and the longer you do this, the harder it becomes to tell the difference between who you are and who you perform. People-pleasing also has a way of distorting self-worth. You begin to measure your value by how useful you are, how helpful, how needed. When people rely on you, you feel secure. When they don't, something inside you tightens. You might feel anxious when you're not actively contributing. Rest can feel uncomfortable. Silence can feel suspicious. Because if you're not doing something for others, what's holding you in place? Psychologically, people-pleasing is often rooted in a nervous system that learned early that love was inconsistent or conditional, not absent, but unpredictable. Sometimes warm, sometimes withdrawn, sometimes present, sometimes preoccupied. The brain adapts to this inconsistency by staying alert, always watching, always adjusting. This is why people-pleasers are often deeply intuitive. They read tone shifts, facial expressions, pauses in conversation. They sense changes before they're spoken. But that sensitivity comes at a cost, because when you're constantly focused outward, you lose contact inward. You may struggle to identify your own feelings unless they become overwhelming. You may downplay your pain because someone else has it worse. You may feel guilty for needing reassurance, rest, or care. Needing feels like asking for too much. So instead, you give and give and give, until one day you feel empty and don't understand why. After all, you've done everything right. You've been kind, you've been accommodating, you've been understanding, and yet something feels missing. There's a quiet loneliness that often follows people-pleasers, not because they lack relationships, but because they're rarely fully present in them as themselves. They're present as support, as safety, as steadiness, but not as someone who needs. And that's the contradiction at the heart of people-pleasing. The very strategy you learned to stay connected slowly disconnects you from yourself. You might notice resentment creeping in, not explosive, but dull, a heaviness, a sense that you're always showing up but rarely being met. And when that resentment scares you, you suppress it too, because anger feels dangerous. It threatens the very harmony you built your identity around, so you turn it inward. You criticize yourself instead. You wonder why you can't just be more grateful, more patient, more understanding. But people-pleasing was never about being good. It was about being safe. And safety, when learned this way, always comes with conditions. To understand the psychology of people-pleasing, we have to begin with one essential truth. No one becomes a people-pleaser because they enjoy erasing themselves. They become one because at some point it worked. Psychologically, people-pleasing is not a personality flaw. It's an adaptation, a survival strategy learned in environments where emotional safety felt uncertain. When a child senses that love, approval, or stability depends on how well they behave, support, or comply, the brain forms a belief early. If I keep others happy, I won't be abandoned. This belief doesn't arrive as a sentence. It arrives as a feeling, a tightening in the chest when conflict appears, a rush of anxiety when someone seems disappointed, a relief when harmony is restored. Over time, the nervous system pairs peace with self-suppression, and that pairing becomes automatic. Neuroscience shows that repeated emotional vigilance trains the brain to stay alert. The amygdala becomes sensitive to social threat. The body learns to treat disapproval the same way it treats danger. That's why people-pleasing doesn't feel like a habit you can simply stop. It feels like instinct, like reflex. As adults, this often shows up as anxiety, chronic self-doubt, and emotional exhaustion. You might find yourself replaying conversations long after they're over, wondering if you said the wrong thing, if your tone was off, if you upset someone without realizing it. You may struggle to set boundaries, not because you don't know what they are, but because enforcing them feels like risking connection. Saying no doesn't feel neutral, it feels threatening. This is closely tied to what psychologists call anxious attachment. When early relationships were inconsistent, sometimes nurturing, sometimes unavailable, the brain learned to stay close by staying agreeable. Connection became something to manage rather than trust. This is why people pleasers often feel torn in relationships. They crave closeness, but feel safest when they're needed rather than known. They give freely, but struggle to receive without guilt. They want support, but don't know how to ask without apologizing. Love feels safer when it's earned. There's also a deep confusion between worth and usefulness. When praise came for being helpful, mature, or understanding, the brain linked value to service. The message became, "I matter when I'm making things easier for others." As an adult, this belief matures into over-functioning, over-giving, over-accommodating. You might be the friend everyone leans on, the partner who compromises first, the employee who does more than required. On the surface, it looks like competence. Inside, it's pressure. Because if your worth depends on being useful, rest becomes dangerous. Doing nothing feels like disappearing, and slowing down feels like letting people see you without your armor. People pleasers also tend to suppress their emotions, not because they don't feel deeply, but because feeling openly once had consequences. Anger might have caused withdrawal. Sadness might have been ignored. Needs might have been dismissed. So the safest option was containment. Emotions didn't disappear. They went underground. This is why many people pleasers describe feeling disconnected from themselves. They can articulate emotions logically, but struggle to feel them fully. They explain their pain instead of experiencing it. This isn't emotional numbness, it's emotional management. Another layer of this psychology is the internal split that forms over time. There's the outward self, the agreeable, reliable, understanding one, and then there's the quieter self, the one who feels tired, unseen, and unsure how to take up space. That quieter self often carries resentment, grief, and unmet needs. But because expressing those needs once felt unsafe, they remain unspoken. This creates an internal tension. You're constantly holding two truths at once. I want connection, and I don't want to be too much. Eventually, this tension surfaces as burnout, not dramatic collapse, but slow depletion. A sense that you're always giving, but rarely replenished. Life begins to feel like performance. Even kindness becomes effortful. Even empathy feels heavy. And yet, people pleasers often struggle to stop, because without the role of being accommodating, a frightening question emerges. Who am I if I don't keep everyone comfortable? This is where many people pleasers feel lost. When they begin to heal, the old strategies no longer work, but the new ones haven't formed yet. Boundaries feel unfamiliar. Directness feels rude. Prioritizing yourself feels selfish. But healing doesn't mean becoming cold or uncaring. It means unlearning the belief that your needs are a threat. Healing begins when you recognize that people-pleasing was never about love. It was about safety, and safety can be learned differently. This process often involves grief. Grieving the times you stayed quiet to keep peace. Grieving the relationships where you were valued more for what you gave than who you were. Grieving the parts of yourself you tucked away to remain acceptable. That grief isn't weakness, it's awareness. Because once you see the pattern, you can no longer unsee it. And slowly, the nervous system begins to learn something new. That disappointment doesn't always mean abandonment. That conflict doesn't always lead to loss. That being honest doesn't automatically make you unlovable. This is not a quick process. Your body learned these rules over years. It will take time to feel safe without performing. But something shifts when you start asking yourself different questions. Not, how do I keep everyone happy? But, what do I actually need right now? At first, the answers may be unclear. That's normal. When you've spent years focused outward, inward awareness takes practice. But with time, something powerful happens. You begin to feel your own edges, your limits, your preferences. You begin to recognize that your worth doesn't disappear when you disappoint someone. That love doesn't have to be earned through self-erasure, that you are allowed to take up space without justifying it. People who heal from people-pleasing don't lose their kindness. They gain choice. They learn that empathy doesn't require self-abandonment, that generosity doesn't mean neglecting themselves. That connection feels deeper when it's built on honesty instead of compliance. The part of you that learned to please was trying to protect you. It did its job. It kept you connected when connection felt fragile. But you don't need that armor in the same way anymore. You are allowed to be direct. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to say no without explaining yourself. And perhaps the most important shift of all, you are allowed to let people see you when you're not okay. Because real connection doesn't come from being easy, it comes from being real. And when you finally stop shaping yourself around other people's comfort, you don't lose love. You find the K in that doesn't require you to disappear. That's the deeper psychology of people-pleasing, not a flaw to fix, but a story to understand. And understanding it is where freedom begins.